Before diving into this incredible story, consider subscribing to the channel and hitting the bell. Every story here has something to say, and you won't want to miss a single one. As Maplewood High School of Arts, the hallways smelled of wood wax and ambition. The walls were decorated with portraits of alumni who had become famous, renowned composers, soloists from major European venues, prodigious conductors. The school was a showcase of American artistic prestige. You didn't enter. You were born there, or paid dearly to be there. Maplewood students talked about their summers spent in master classes in Salzburg or in residencies in Aspen. Some arrived in cars that adults couldn't have bought in 10 years of work. Their violins were Stradivarius modern, assured like jewels, worn like scepters. Their days were punctuated by rehearsals, competitions, vocal coaching, and filmed auditions. They walked the corridors as if on a stage, already certain of an exceptional destiny. But at dawn, before the first chords rang out in the rehearsal rooms, another melody resonated, that of the broom scrubbing the floor, the clatter of a rolling bucket, the quiet sigh of a tired man. Robert Bennett, the janitor, paced the empty corridors with quiet dignity. His hands were calloused, his knees worn from years of work. He knew every stain, every creak in the floorboards, every faulty light bulb. He didn't speak much, but always greeted those who looked at him, though they were few and far between. His daughter often walked beside him, Madison Bennett, 16 years old, thin, pale, almost invisible. She always wore the same worn sneakers and a patched-up backpack. Unlike the other kids at the school, she didn't make noise, didn't laugh loudly, didn't talk about her ambitions out loud. She observed intensely. Every morning, before heading to her much more modest public high school across the river, she accompanied her father. They had this silent ritual, a shared coffee from a dented thermos, a few words about the weather, a knowing glance when a teacher royally ignored them as they walked by. But what she was most looking forward to was the time when the doors of the rehearsal studios remained ajar. She would stop at a distance, far enough away not to disturb, but close enough to hear. And then she would close her eyes. Sometimes it was a student playing a Bach adagio on a grand piano. Other times it was a string duet, or a soprano voice rehearsing in Italian. She didn't always know the names of the pieces, but she felt their weight, their beauty, their pain. She wanted to play. She had dreamed of it since she was 5. But violins, at the Bennett's house, only existed in photographs. So one day, his father, with his handyman's hands, made him a raw wood violin. He took an old board abandoned behind the school, traced its outlines with religious care. He fixed some metal wires recovered from an old fan. It was not a real instrument. It was a promise. When he offered it to him, he simply said, "You can't always have it all, but you can always learn to dream right." Since then, every night in their small 2-room apartment above a convenience store, Madison would reenact the movements she'd seen in the hallways. Her father would read the newspaper silently, pretending not to be watching, but each invisible note made her seem a little bigger in his eyes. She had taught herself silence, patience, to disciplines. She had no teacher, no sheet music, no soundproof room. But she had the fire, and an incredible memory. She remembered the students' fingers on the strings, the tempo, the modulations. She recreated them in her head. She imitated the vibratos with uncanny precision, only by observing the wrists through the steamy windows. She was just a shadow in the halls of Maplewood. But soon, her name would resonate as a matter of course. One autumn evening, as red and gold leaves swirled through the campus walkways, a gala concert had just concluded in Maplewood's main hall. The audience had left, satiated with Mendelssohn arias and champagne. The red velvet seats were still warm. The music sheets lay scattered on the music stands, and the spotlights were beginning to go out one by one. Only the shadows remained, those of the technicians, of a few forgotten instruments, and that of Robert Bennett, leaning over to pick up crumpled programs. Madison, curious, silent, had slipped into the room, like a ghost between the stage curtains. Her eyes swept over the abandoned instruments, the traces of music still suspended in the air. She spotted a violin forgotten in a corner, half hidden behind a music stand. The box was cracked, the shine of the varnish dulled. Yet she approached it as if walking toward a treasure. She crouched down gently, reached out, and then, "Are you planning to steal it?" The voice made her jump. Behind her stood Mr. Gregory Walker, the head violin teacher. A lanky figure, always in a three-piece suit, with a colorful pocket square sticking out from his jacket like a flag of arrogance. His gaze was cold, his smile dry. He was known throughout the school for his extreme demands, but especially for his blatant disdain for anyone who didn't fit the Maplewood profile. Anyone without a musical pedigree, a father who was a patron of the arts, or a mother in the record industry. He crossed his arms, contemptuously. You have no business here. This isn't a museum, much less a flea market. Madison, petrified, slowly stood up. But she wasn't running away. Her gaze remained fixed on the violin. She stammered. It's damaged. I just wanted to look at it. Walker Rickena. Look? Do you think you can play a violin just by looking at it? It's not a street guitar, kiddo. It's a concert instrument. It takes years. And a lot of money. Do you know how much a professional bow costs? He stepped forward slowly and added with a wry smile. I doubt your family has a toaster at that price. Madison felt her cheeks burn. She clenched her fists, but remained silent. Walker bent down, picked up the violin with a disdainful air. He blew off the dust, observed the crack with a sneer. That one's ruined. Good for the trash. But here. He handed it to him abruptly. Gift. Treat yourself. It's worthless. Like your chances of playing one day. His words smacked the empty room like a slap. But Madison didn't back down. She reached out and took the instrument. It was heavier than she'd imagined, and more fragile too. A string dangled, the bridge was twisted, and a deep gash marked the side of the wood like an old scar. But in her arms, it became more than an abandoned object. It was a calling, a responsibility. She looked up at Walker and replied, calmly, Thanks. He raised an eyebrow, puzzled. Do you thank me? Yes. Because I'm not going to pretend. I'm going to learn. Then she turned on her heel and left the room. The violin clutched to her like a child would clutch a fragile flame in the wind. It wasn't a gift. It was an insult. But she would make one oath. Every night, once the lights in the apartment went out and his father's heavy footsteps fell silent in the next room, Madison would slip out of bed. She would gently place the blanket over the pillow to give the illusion that she was asleep, then open her closet where, wrapped in an old bath towel, lay the battered violin Mr. Walker had given her. She took it out with the respect one would give to a relic. Each movement was slow and precise. She placed the instrument on the table, turned on a small clamp-on desk lamp, then took out her makeshift kit, cheap wood glue, a nail file, small pieces of sandpaper. She scraped away the damaged parts, glued the cracks millimeter by millimeter, replaced the pins with parts salvaged from broken toys. For the missing strings, she had found steel wires in the shed, remnants of electrical cables her father hadn't used. They weren't tuned, nor harmonious, but they produced a sound. A start. Every night, for weeks, she worked on this instrument. It was no longer a violin. It was a resurrection. Then, once the violin was able to produce a few notes, she moved on to the second phase, learning. No teacher. No method. Just an old telephone cracked, whose screen only worked in one corner. She downloaded cached videos from the neighborhood's free Wi-Fi hotspots, concert clips, beginner tutorials, scale demonstrations. She would place the phone on a pile of books and mimic the movements she saw. Arm outstretched, back straight. She adjusted the position of her chin, trying to reproduce the angle of her wrist. But the most difficult thing was the sound. She had never heard a violin in tune-up close. She didn't know if what she was playing was correct. So she listened to the vibrations. She focused on what she felt through her body, through the wood, through the silence. She was practicing until his fingers are red, sometimes until it bled. She had stuck small bandages on the first phalanges to continue playing without stopping. She ignored the pain, because with each note torn from the damaged violin, she felt as if she were stealing a fragment of her dream from the real world. One afternoon a few months later, while the students at his public high school were on lunch break, Madison went behind the gym. It was her secret place. Away from prying eyes, she could play without fear, leaning against the brick wall, her eyes half closed, lost in her own world. That day, she was performing a piece she had composed herself, a sort of sad lullaby, inspired by a tune she heard in Maplewood and transformed over the nights into something deeply personal. The sounds were simple, raw, but something authentic emanated from them. A sincere fragility, a naked emotion. A few meters away, a woman stopped. Mrs. Laura Jenkins, a tall, dark-haired, elegant high school music teacher known for her gentleness and rigor, remained frozen. Her gaze was fixed on the young girl who, unaware of her presence, played as if no one had ever looked at her. And perhaps that was true. She didn't hear perfection, but she heard the truth. She waited for the song to end, then moved forward quietly. Madison looked up, surprised, almost ashamed. Mrs. Jenkins gave him a frank smile. "Where did you learn to play like that?" Madison looked down uncomfortably, as if she'd just been caught stealing something. "Nowhere. I listen, and I copy." A silence. Then Mrs. Jenkins slowly knelt down to his level, looked at the instrument, saw the homemade repairs, the marks, the bandages on his fingers. "You don't copy. You understand. It's very different." She held out her hand delicately. "Do you want me to help you?" Madison hesitated for a second, then nodded silently. From that day on, everything changed. Mrs. Jenkins became his first real mentor. She lent him a bow in good condition, corrected his positions, helped him tune his violin, and above all, gave him something no one had ever offered him: validation. And Madison, every day, flew a little further. A year had passed since that meeting behind the gym. A year of sleepless nights, rough scales, painful progress, and sublime discoveries. Under the benevolent but demanding tutelage of Mrs. Jenkins, Madison had learned much more than technique. She had learned to breathe with her instrument, to listen to it like a heart beating between her hands. Then the announcement came. Maplewood High School of Arts would be the host of the national audition of the Young Talents Orchestra, a prestigious competition. Filmed, broadcast live on a cultural channel. Sponsored by the Juilliard Young Program, the Antechamber of Prodigies. Madison, at first, didn't dare believe it. She had no name, no official musical background, no conservatory certificate. But Mrs. Jenkins, without asking his opinion, enrolled him. "You have the right to play wherever your talent takes you. And believe me, you didn't get here by mistake." She spoke to the pageant management and persisted. She spoke of fairness, raw beauty, and the duty not to confuse privilege with merit. An old colleague supported her. Finally, by one vote, Madison's application was accepted. Mrs. Jenkins mobilized her network. A former Juilliard student lent her a Pernambuco would bow, supple and nervous. A local seamstress made him uniform over, black, elegant, in his size. But Madison insisted on keep his violin, the one who was given to him to humiliate him, the one she had restored night after night. He wasn't perfect, but he was she. When day came, Madison stood alone in front of Maplewood's glass doors. The sun lit up the marble columns, and students arrived in luxury cars, holding their instruments like living trophies. She crossed the threshold with her heart pounding in her chest. And immediately, all eyes turned to her. She wasn't one of them, not according to their codes. Some students, recognizing the janitor's daughter, exchanged mocking smiles. Others were simply surprised to see her there, a file in her hand. Then a voice rose, drawling, ironic. Well, I see you still have my present." Mr. Walker, wearing a tie, arms crossed, watched him from afar. Her smile was identical to the previous year. "I take it you came to assist?" Madison stopped. She fixed her eyes on his. "No, sir. I am a candidate." A brief silence followed. He raised his eyebrows in mock awe. "Well, have fun." Backstage, Madison waited her turn. The sound of her footsteps echoed on the wooden floor. She clutched the violin to her chest. Her hands trembled slightly. Not from fear. Not from pent-up tension. Not from a lifetime compressed into a single moment. His name was announced. She entered the stage, alone. Harsh light on her. Huge room. Cameras. Audition judge at the front. Maplewood students in the stands. She could see almost nothing beyond the spotlight, but she felt all. She took a deep breath, closed her eyes, and put down the bow. The first sound was light, almost timid. Then came a slide, a rise, a tension, and the music was born. But it wasn't a well-known piece. It was his original composition, which Madison had woven from memories, pains, silences, stifled tears, and hidden tenderness. Every note spoke. From its beginnings behind the glass doors, teasing in the corridors, from his father's tired but proud gaze. Nights spent gluing back together a violin that had been thrown at him as a joke. And of this strength that he had never been taught. Self-belief when no one sees you. The room was frozen. Even Mr. Walker, deep down, didn't blink anymore. When the last notes fell like dead leaves, there was a silence. Long, thick, almost sacred. Then, isolated applause. Then two. Then the whole room. Standing. Some of the students who had been mocking had tears in their eyes. Mrs. Jenkins stood against a wall, holding her hand to her heart, tears flowing freely. Among the jury, a woman stood up, Catherine Myers, world-renowned violinist, former Juilliard child prodigy. She walked up to the microphone, still upset. You are the very soul of music. You don't play, you transmit. You have just written something unforgettable. Where did you learn? Madison, standing straight, her voice calm but full of dignity, replied. Behind the doors. In the shadows. With a violin I was given to mock. Madison Bennett was admitted to the Juilliard School with a full scholarship, a rare, almost legendary occurrence, reserved for a select few each decade. The official announcement was relayed in art bulletins, then picked up by the mainstream press. Social media quickly went wild. His filmed performance at the competition was uploaded to YouTube by a technician who had been upset backstage. Within 72 hours, the video reached more than 10 million views. The legend was written before their eyes. The janitor's daughter who conquered the world with a broken violin. Hashtags flourished. Hashtag broken violin. Hashtag Madison Bennett. Hashtag play from the heart. Professional musicians praised the accuracy, purity, and raw power of his music. Teachers saw it as a lesson in humility. Young people in difficulty found a role model there. She received letters from all over the world, from orphanages in Nigeria, rural schools in the Midwest, conservatories in Europe. One girl from Rio wrote, I understood that even with nothing, you can be worth everything. In Maplewood, however, the mood was less bright. Mr. Gregory Walker, after years of omnipotence and arrogant favoritism, was summoned to the boardroom. A recording had circulated, capturing his words on the day he had given the violin as a gift. The management, caught in the media storm, had to react publicly. He received an official reprimand, was suspended for a term, and lost his right to chair admissions juries. His former students, even the most favored, began to look at him differently. The man who had always walked with his chin held high and a smirk now walked the corridors with his shoulders slumped and his expression absent. He wasn't smiling anymore. Not in the same way. Never. A few months later, Carnegie Hall, the largest theater in the world. Gilding, red velvet curtains, illuminated balconies. The room was packed. On the program, in gold letters, Madison Bennett, solo recital, violin, and original compositions. In the artist's dressing room, a huge bouquet awaited him, accompanied by a handwritten note. You are the music this world has been waiting for. C. Myers. In the stands, Robert Bennett, sitting in the front row, was wearing an oversized black suit, lent by a neighbor, and a shirt he had ironed 3 times that morning. His shoes had been hand-polished. He even cut his beard. But above all, he held between his fingers a photo of Madison as a child, standing with his fake wooden violin in his arms. When she entered the stage, in a long dress, straight as an arrow and dignified as a queen, a dazzling silence enveloped the room. She made no unnecessary gestures, no exaggerated bows. She simply lifted the violin. This one, the same one, restored, still with his scars visible, like a reminder. And she played. For 40 minutes, she made the walls cry. His music spoke for the invisible, the forgotten, the sons and daughters of cleaners, workers, janitors. Each note was a cry of love, of forgiveness, a sweet revenge. Every silence between sentences was a prayer. At the end, before the encore, she took the microphone. A single spotlight illuminated her face. His voice barely trembled. My father taught me that value is not seen in what we wear, but in what we build. He gave me the courage to dream beyond our walls. She paused, looked her father straight in the eye, then added, This violin was given to me to humble me. It has become my voice. Tonight, it speaks for all those who never had their own. And there, without waiting, she played one last piece. An adagio that she had composed in secret. Sober, slow, deep. She titled it, For Robert. And when the last note faded into the heights of Carnegie Hall, Robert Bennett closed his eyes and wept. No sadness, but of that pride that only giants know.